Hello, hello. We are live, or I am live, I suppose, just on my own today. Um, I do want to get back to having some guests on the live stream in the future, but since I missed the past, or at least the past week, I'm not sure when the last one was that I did. I was out of town for the weekend last weekend, for the long weekend, so figured I'd do another solo Q&A session. And then as we kind of get later into, I want to say in October is when I'm going to start having some more guests on, or at least trying to. I've got some that are potentially a little bit exciting, so or at least for me. But yeah, we're live doing a Q&A session today. I see I started 2 minutes early, so feel free to drop any questions that you might have in the chat. Don't actually. I don't even know if I turned super chat on, but that's okay. I'll do my best to get through as many as I can, and yeah, and then we'll keep going. How's everybody doing today? Looking forward to the stealth review. First impression video left me wanting more from Resolve. Yeah, the thing with that was it was literally my first impression. Like a lot, like those first impressions videos are as candid as it gets. That's so, um, and I think it's important to keep in mind that a lot of that is based on sort of the framing of whatever it was that I was listening to before or the time of day and all that. So that's why I don't think it's sufficient. It's funny because Sean Olive and I were going back and forth on this topic on Twitter. Um, on the topic of first impressions versus long-term listening and where the value is. And I think his contention was that in his research around 30 to 40 minutes was a good amount of time, because any longer than that your brain would adjust too much. Ooh, my autofocus is having a good time. Let me know how the levels are and all that stuff, by the way. And just gonna turn the there we go. Yeah, I tend to think there's some truth to that, because to the first impressions kind of having a potentially negative effect on your assessment or your judgment, because, or yeah, sorry, the long-term assessments. But I still think that a 30-minute, I think you have to do both, is I guess what my point is. Like, the 30-minute assessment works if you're doing a lot of comparisons. Like if you have 30 minutes and then or even a shorter amount of time, and then after that you're comparing it to something else and then going back. So if you're doing that kind of stuff, I think that more first impressions thing works really quite well. But I think doing that over the course of a longer period of time is also essential, because, so for example, I'm not suggesting you would just listen to one headphone over the course of 2 weeks, and then make your assessment after just listening to that headphone. I mean more so spending time comparing over the course of that that week or 2 weeks or whatever it is to other things, to make sure that you aren't being biased or framed by the anything else that you might have been doing over the course of that day, the mood you're in, the type of music you want to listen to. If you've just spent the day on an airplane, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up at this point, but there's all kinds of stuff that can lead up to one day in particular, or even just over the course of an hour, that can be influential. And so I think the problem there is that there's no, I'm not aware of any way that you would be able to actually control for that either, control for the study with the condition of 2-week assessments. So I completely understand his point, and I agree with it to a large extent for what he was doing there. Levels are a little low. Man, on OBS it looks like I'm clipping. Turn your amplifier up. What's up, Metal? See Banbeo, good to see you. Guys, if you're interested in other IEM reviews and measurements, Banbeo has a website as well, where he's doing that kind of stuff. So shout out to Banbeo. Ace of Spades, good to see you. But yeah, to get to the question about the stealth there, I have a somewhat different take on it from what I had in my initial assessment. I initially thought that it was really open sounding, for a closed back, a really large soundstage. And I think I even noted that in that impressions video, that after even listening to it for a little bit, during that, I didn't feel like it was as spacious as I initially thought, but rather that it was just very separated. Level is low. Add in. No, there is a compressor. It just looks like I'm clipping on OBS. So I have somewhat of a different take on the stealth now. By the way, these are the Aeon. Let me just. Yeah, these are Aeon Aeon X closed from Drop. So they sent these over for a review. And they sent the open ones as well, which are over there. But so I'm doing the comparison there, and then I'm deciding. I eventually want to do kind of like a wrap up or like a roundup of like headphones under $500, and these are at the high end of that. So I want to sort of include that in that video. But yeah, so with the stealth, actually I've filmed the review. I've written the review. But I still need to do some of the finer touches. I need to finish editing the video, and then that will eventually go into. They'll eventually get published. So I'm not sure exactly when that's going to be. Likely early next week at the earliest, but sometime next week most likely. You didn't get the notification. Oh, that's too bad. But yeah, let me just continue on here and go back to some more questions. Basically, the stealths are garbage? No, not at all. The stealths are one of the best sounding closed-back headphones ever made. Like, look at the frequency response. It's phenomenal. I mean, there is an element of that where I look at that and go, a lot of the sentiment towards that, where people are saying, look at how amazing this is because of how well it measures. The same is true for headphones like the AKG K371, the HiFiMan Sundara, the list goes on. And the question that I would pose to anybody who is making their assessment just on the measurements there is, what makes this $4,000 worthy and those other well-measuring headphones not? I suppose that's the question. And somebody's going to come in and say the distortion's really low, but the distortion's really low on other headphones too. And also, it's all below the audible threshold. So in my opinion, there's more to it than that. And yeah, like for the other aspects, most of the other aspects, the stealth does really well. Like I see it as kind of like, a turbo noir. My only, I guess I'm spoiling a little bit here, but my only contention there is like, for me, I'm the kind of person where that use case, like, something like this as well, like a portable closed back planar magnetic headphone with a good frequency response that's lightweight and comfortable, that gets satisfied so well by the Noir for me that I don't know if I would need to have that be the ultra flagship, like in the stealth. Like for me, I'd say like, I know it's more expensive, but like I would say in an environment where I am able to listen to the best thing that I could possibly listen to, which is what I would spend that, 4,000, 6,000 or whatever on, whether it's a Susvara or Utopia or D8000 Pro or whatever, right? In that event, I don't see why I wouldn't, use one of those open back headphones, or honestly, like a, HiFiMan HE6, original HE6. But, so thinking about it that way, it's like, for the use case that I would have for the stealth, the Noir satisfies that in a almost as good fashion. But I do think that it's a very good headphone. Like just completely taking that out of it and taking all the price out of it and all that stuff. Like it's one of the best sounding headphones available. Period. All right. I do not have any opinions on Wells Audio. I've heard the name. There's the Milo, I think. Or maybe I'm thinking of something else. Is that the Aeon RT? With those glasses, does it get uncomfortable after about an hour with the Aeon clamp force? I don't know if the X is exactly the same as the RT, but from my understanding, what they did with the X is they changed the pads a little bit to retune it. And I actually have an original Aeon closed as well at the studio, and I was comparing the X versus the original, and it is different. So with this one, with these pads, there's the perforated pads on it. If that's what they did with the with RT, then it would be, but I'm not sure if that's if it's exactly the same. I did. I did talk to them about it, about the um, uh, Aeons and whatnot, and they said, yeah, that it's a drop product. But whether that's the same pads, I'm not sure. Let's see. All right. I think we had a conversation about this before. How do you think about a review where first impressions and long exposure is included? Like both. Oh yeah, we did talk about this. Where both first impressions and then the longer review. Yeah, I think that's a probably the best way of doing it from a information standpoint. However, because like, so for example, Kryn has talked even on this on this podcast or live stream that we do. He's said that in some sense he's made a career out of first impressions, and what I wonder is if those would be different if he had on various different things. I'm not saying they would. I'm just curious what the results would be. If it was like an after 2 week kind of thing, and then he could maybe compare what the initial impression was versus the longer form stuff. I think the problem with doing that is that, and we talked about this in the past as well. If you just do if you start off with doing the first impressions, most people are just going to use that first impression as the narrative and then run with it, and then that narrative will get perpetuated over time, and only a fraction of the people who saw the first impression are going to come back for the full piece. And I think that's really the issue. So if something changes, that change, you don't really have that much of an opportunity to, I guess, counteract the things that you may have, in cases where they don't agree, right? Because first impressions can absolutely be fallible, as I mentioned. There's there are definitely issues with that. With all the stuff I just mentioned earlier on. Getting back to the question about the Aeon's clamp force. Actually, with these pads, it's nowhere near as intense. I think when they changed the pads, they also maybe made it a little bit more comfortable, softer. But I need to spend more time with them on my head because, I've only really spent like a couple hours at a time with them, comparing them back and forth. So maybe it will, yeah. I'm also a big proponent of if you wear glasses, either use contacts or get glasses with thin arms, because the thicker arms, especially with headphones like these that have a high driver resonance frequency, I think it's around 400 hertz with these ones. It might even be higher than that. But anyways, if you break the seal with those thick glasses, you can lose all the bass. And to a certain extent, the stealth is like that as well. It was something where, like, if somebody's it wasn't just me who found this. If you're wearing glasses that have really thick arms, and I actually measured this with those thicker armed glasses, as soon as you break the seal, that bass is gone. Now, with that said, I think on most people they won't have too much trouble actually getting a seal. But that's why I say thin arms for audiophiles, not thin arms, but like thin arms for glasses. Let's see. Have you tried the ZMF Aeolus? What's your opinion if you have? I have heard it, but I haven't had enough time with it to make any, proper assessment or judgment about it. So, I need to borrow somebody's. Or maybe I'll talk to Zach at CanJam if everything still goes according to plan. I know I've said we don't have a better way, though I've been thinking about the efficiency of combining both. Actually, yeah, so that's back to do with the first impressions thing. I think there was one of the reviewers on our team I think it is maybe Chrono who does it this way, but he actually does the first impressions in his like review post in his article. It could be somebody else. I could be butchering this, but in the review articles, it's like the first impressions, and then there's the following, rest of it in the full article, which I think is a cool way of doing it, because then you get to see what the first impressions would be like, and then whether or not any of that changes over time. But Sean's absolutely right that like the brain will normalize and adjust to certain frequency responses that are maybe not as ideal over time, and then that suddenly becomes normal. Which, I mean, it in some ways that has its own merits, because then you might be evaluating certain other things that you weren't initially evaluating, but realistically I think that poses more of a problem that confounds things rather than a benefit. But that's why for me it's like that 2 weeks is spent, or that 1 week or however long it is spent taking the headphones off, putting the other headphones on, level matched and all that stuff, doing measurements, testing resonance frequencies, and you guys know how it goes. And also importantly, like your list of test tracks, right? Like at this point, like I've got a lot of test tracks, and I've got a whole, like, most of the music that I have is just test tracks that I listen to, because I don't get to have joy in my life. I just have to spend time testing headphones. No, I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean, right? Like there's a lot of you can't just listen to the same tracks and have it be just a small handful of tracks. Like the more tracks the better, and I suppose being consistent with those tracks is also pretty important. Rob Hawk, how's it going, man? Is the Stealth a better version of the Aeon 2 Noir, or is there more to it? I wouldn't say just a better version. It's better in quite literally every way, for me at least. So it's not just that it's slightly more detailed. It's not just that it's slightly more separated. It's not just that it's slightly more better for its frequency response overall. I would say across the board it is like just leveled up. But in that sense, it has similar strengths and weaknesses. I'll put it to you that way. But I think the more interesting comparison for me was actually between the Ether 2, or between it and the Ether 2. And the Stealth mopped the floor with the Ether 2. I was kind of like, okay, yeah, this is a step up, definitely. What is the best high-end headphone for bass? Bass quality or bass quantity? Bass quality, I'm going to say Focal Utopia. That thing is a punchy boy. Honestly, that Abyss thing was pretty good for the bass. It was a bit of a party trick. If you want, like, big bass on a planar, that'll do it. Yeah, the AB1266 thing. And to a certain extent, this HE6, but with adding a bass shelf to the HE6 is so much fun. LCD4 as well. Actually, we have an LCD4 in right now, and so it's fun because I'm using it to sort of compare with some of the other high-end headphones that are coming out right now, the other flagships, to see kind of where they're at in relation to the LCD4, which has been out for a while. And it does have the new pads on it, although it doesn't measure quite as well as like the X. Well, not that the X is perfect either, but like it's still a little bit on the. It measures closer to like the previous one to the 2020 ones, which is definitely an improvement for the 2020 stuff. See more folks in here now. JE, thank you. Can you discuss the differences between various versions of the HiFiMan Aria? Sort of. I can't fully give the latest on this because I don't have the version 3 in, but I do have a version 2 here. I say version 2. This one was sent over. So the first one that I evaluated like years ago on my original channel there, that was a version 1 Aria, and you could tell, like, you could actually see that the mesh was different from this one that I got in here. That one was a little bit gritty in the treble. It had a hint of that sort of sibilance, and I didn't really. It was almost like to the point where I liked the Ananda better. Even though the Aria was technically more impressive for sure. It's just that the Ananda had a smoother treble presentation, and I'm kind of sensitive to that, 8K stuff. And that the Aria, that original Aria, had a little bit too much there for me. Then I tried this second revision, which got sent for a more recent review in the past year, I think, or maybe a year and a half. And it would have been before 2020 actually, I believe, because that was I asked Fang Bian about that at CanJam 2020. So that was in February. So before February 2020 at least. I got that one in, and I didn't think about it at the time. I just thought this was an Aria, and I listened to it, and I thought, wait, that sort of grittiness for the sibilant sound is gone. It's a lot better. And then I noticed afterwards, and even through talking with Fang about this, I noticed afterwards, that they had changed the dust cover there. So it used to be kind of almost like a more see-through mesh material, and then they moved to a dust cover that was, I think it was something to do with the color of it, and that the material was maybe a little different as well. And so I don't want to say it was like a big difference. Like the Sundara pad change was a much bigger difference than the Arya change, but that one thing in the treble did sound better to me in the second version of the Arya. So somebody knows what they're doing. And then the third revision, which is the more recent one that people are talking about now, it's one that HiFiMan has just sort of openly published and talked about, where they've introduced the stealth magnets to it. Now, I have to say that, like, from my investigation with the stealth magnets on other headphones, comparing stealth magnets to non-stealth magnets, there's not a huge difference in terms of the frequency response generally, except in the high frequencies. And that's really where some of that may show up. So that's really, when I take a look at the V3 Aria, I'll compare it to the V2 once we get a V3 in. I'll basically, I'm going to do the full evaluation there, but the main thing that I'll be trying to figure out is the impact of the stealth magnets there. I know I saw some impressions that people had, but it's hard for me to really get that strong a sense of that without having them both in hand. But my expectation there is that it's not like, if anything significant is going to be different, it would be in the upper frequencies, due to the stealth magnet change. But that doesn't always mean that it's for the better, right? It just means that that's where the difference is likely to be, unless they change something else as well. So I hope that answers your question there. Anyone suggestions for closed back headphones under $600? AKG K371. These are pretty good too. The Aeon X closed. I like the closed better than the open. I think I still need to listen more. There is actually one application that I like the open better for, and it's when listening to metal music. I think it's actually the perfect headphone for that kind of stuff, or not perfect, but like around that price, it's pretty good for it. I probably need to catch up here. What do you think of the Moondrop variations? Yeah, really nice, really nice. Theo did a review of it on headphones.com, the website, and so definitely check that out because I agree. All right. Let's see what else. Let's get some spicy stuff here. Variations can be better than B2, though it's currently the most incoherent Moondrop I have heard. I don't know. I would take variations over B2. It's more detailed. Like that. It's more detailed. I mean, yes, the bass is boosted on it, but it's very detailed. And I think I like the variations better than the Oracle. Now, I will say though, like the variations, like they do something with the tuning there that in like the lower treble somewhere in the treble that's just not quite right. But it is very close. Very close. And of course, we all, supposedly sound waves can take a different path to the eardrum. So there might, as much as we theoretically should hear things much more similarly than differently, there are examples where maybe we don't necessarily. And yeah, that the differences in frequency response at the eardrum would be a difference of kind rather than degree, which that gets into the whole question about like our brains normalizing for ear gain for the amplification that our ears have and all that stuff. And yeah, so I have a theory about that, but yeah, I mean we should be hearing stuff more similarly than differently. You guys see lots of questions about the Noir and the Stealth and the Ether. Hope you like the new Meze Elite. So this is the thing. I think it's... I made a mistake in the graphs because I not in the measurements, but in the naming of the graphs, I called it the Empyrean Elite, but I think it's actually just supposed to be Meze Elite, even though it's the same. It looks the same as Empyrean, just a different colorway. It's the same ideas as well. So I think they're intending it to be called just the Meze Elite. But yeah, I was not a fan of the original Empyrean. I didn't think it was bad. I actually, there were certain things about the tuning that I liked. Like I quite liked where the ear gain level was on it. Just a little relaxed, you know. But then the bass and then the treble were not really to my liking at all. But the Elite definitely is better on all fronts. I mean, it looks a little bit more weird in the bass because it has that weird notch, like weird driver mode at around 400 hertz, I think. And you can actually even see that's where the distortion bump shows up, even though the distortion is actually really well controlled on it. It's way below, you know, the audible threshold. I was actually really impressed with the distortion on that. But regardless, it did improve on just about all the aspects. So it brought the treble balance in line. It also cleaned up a little bit of the muddiness in the bass, even though it's still there. It's still like piano. When you listen to like the piano recordings, like go down to the lower notes kind of get lost a little bit in the soup still. But it's a much more pleasant, well, I say much more, it is a more pleasant tuning overall for me, and it does also sound like it's a little bit more incisive. So yeah, it's an improvement. Now, is it $4,000 worth? No. I mean, you still have to I think you still have to, like, if you're gonna get that headphone, you have to probably get it because of the build, the comfort, and the aesthetics, you know, over something like an original HE6 or something. I know you can't get this new, but you get the idea, right? Like, there's other headphones that I think outperform it for the price. I think all of those, like the Stealth outperforms it. You know, the Utopia, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, LCD4 with the EQ, of course. You know, but that the comfort of the Empyrean is really the main selling point for me. Let's see. Aeon RT and Aeon X are the same, and then there's the Aeon Flow and the Aeon 2 and the Aeon 2 Noir. All right. I don't know how different the Aeon RT and the Aeon X are. It wouldn't surprise me if they're the same, you know, because, you know, in both cases it's a change in the frequency response due to the pads, I believe. But yeah, one is a drop product and one is sold directly through DCA, so I don't know. And then the Aeon 2 and Aeon 2 Noir are also theoretically the same. Just the Noir comes with the default perforated pads and it's black. That's my understanding. Now I think you can buy the default. I think you can buy the perforated pads separately if you already own the Aeon 2, and it's worth doing because it means you don't have to use those tuning filters, which I'm not a fan of. But yeah, the Aeon 2 with the perforated pads is solid. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay, so that's why I'm not at the current conversation. I gotta figure out a way to deal with that. THD is a very poor indicator of audible performance indeed. Yes, it is. I mean, we showed that it's... I actually have to publish another piece from Blaine. It's sort of the follow-up to the Synad piece that we did, where it sort of demonstrates, it simulates distortion from various different amplifiers to try and see where the audible threshold is for that stuff. And yeah, you can't hear it. Like, you can have all kinds of fun talking about, you know, one inaudible distortion versus another and how much better one, you know, inaudible distortion is compared to another inaudible distortion. But reality is that it doesn't matter. The only time that does matter, I think, is when you are getting into EQ. That's when I think it's those questions become relevant. Pass the like, otherwise Bose will tune all the audiophile headphones. Hey man, I want Sean to tune all the... No, I'm just kidding. I'll try and catch up here. How about dynamics? DCA always lacked that for me. Yeah, this is the question, right? Like, there's always that question with it. I think I really wish that people would engage with this, with, you know, the thesis that a necessary condition for this quality is a low driver resonance frequency, like below 100 hertz, and low driver damping. I like that some combination there is responsible, because like if you just like it doesn't even take science to figure that out. Like I think if you just look at like if you just do sort of a category evaluation, right? Like of the category planar magnetic headphones, which are the ones that are subjectively well received for this quality? And I'm not just saying by me, but like, generally speaking, among, audiophile communities, there's only really a handful of them. And then if you look at, well, what are the common traits? Because they're not all, they all have, various different parameters, but the common parameters among them, it's driver resonance frequency being below 100 hertz and a fairly high Q for that, so fairly low damping on the driver. So I mean, even if that's not responsible, like I don't think it's a sufficient condition, because we have headphones like the Aria, which kind of throw that off a little bit. But I think the Aria also, like those egg-shaped HiFiMans, there's potentially reasons why those are counterexamples. But I wish people would sort of take that seriously, because like that, at the very least, I think that's something to, if we can debunk it, we should. We should find, if there's something that we can find that is subjectively well received for this quality in a planar magnetic headphone that doesn't exhibit these parameters, then then we could write that off. But at the moment, I can't think of a single one. So, and again, I have to be careful, because I don't want to like just say this is like just based on my assessment, because it's not. You could talk to Metal 571 about this as well. You could talk to Android. You could talk to other reviewers as well. You could talk to Max Settings. You could talk to there's a lot of people who know about this quality and properly understand it, and that it's not just correlated with bass level. They'll generally come to the same conclusions about this stuff. But to get to the question, yeah, I mean these are all fairly high driver resonance headphones, so they don't seem to have that quality all that much. But also not everybody seems to care. Like the absence of this sort of macro contrast quality is a kind of softness that you get headphones like the Ananda and the Aria that also kind of exhibit that, and they are very highly regarded headphones by me as well. There's another argument that I don't really agree with, but it's from one of my friends actually made this point. It said that if the point was that the macro contrast quality is mutually exclusive with, or potentially mutually exclusive with something like detail, and the more detailed something is, the more you have to trade off on this sort of macro contrast quality. And I don't fully agree with that, once again, because the HE6 exists, the original, and the LCD4 is another good example, and the Abyss is another good example. But it would be an interesting thing to study as well. Will you be doing streams with Tyler again? Yeah, I don't see why not. Mainly, we've for this format, for the Q&A format, it made more sense to have one person. But when we have guests on and stuff like that, which I do want to get back into, it makes more sense to have a host there. I think one of the other issues is that Tyler he's got a family, and so he can't always be available for these. But yeah, Tyler's always good times. From price to performance ratio, which one is better, HE400SE or the Sundara? Ooh, it depends how much you care, because they are both excellent for price to performance. So like the HE400SE, here's the reason why I'm going to say Sundara. HE400SE has stiff competition at $200. Like I know the HE400SE is like it's 150, and I even think it was less than that at times. So somewhere around $150, right? But if you go up to $200, I would take the HD560S over that. They're close. If you want a planar, then yes, go ahead with the 400SE. But like, I think that the 560S has more strengths there. And then slightly more expensive than that at $220 is the HE6xx, which scales like crazy. Then you're into this crazy value territory. So contrast that with the Sundara, which is a $350 headphone, so it's more expensive than all of those. But there is a very good argument that the Sundara is, at least the 2020 or whatever the current pads are, that's better than everything under $700. And the next step up there would be something like an Alex, and I know even Metal would take the Sundara over that. So, the distance that you get with the Sundara 2020 is quite high. Even something like this is in the running there at $500, but I can see very good reasons why someone would prefer the Sundara over this. This is obviously closed back, so it's not really in the same category, but you guys get the idea. Let's see. Does anybody actually go from objectivist every measurement matters to objectivist mostly oriented by FR, or is it just Zeus fans who figured out the existence of tonality? I'm not sure what you mean by that. But actually, on that subject, I mean, I've seen a number of videos out about the whole subjectivist debate, and articles as well. And at some point, I'll have to throw my hat in the ring there, because from my point of view, there is no sane subjectivist opinion. And the problem is that there are people who are very focused on, basically they commit the fallacy of quantification. They're focused on, because we have these tools right now, therefore that's all there is, and that I think is a very obvious fallacy. But it's they're focused on the things that they can measure rather than trying to consider what other things there might be, or analyze their existing measurements in terms of. But that doesn't. So in saying that, the knockdown arguments against the subjectivists and stuff like that, I think are so commonly misplaced, because they will try and lump them all into a category of people who believe in magic, and I don't know of any subjectivist who, quote unquote subjectivist. I don't know of anybody who actually believes in magic. I don't think it's just that they're not interested in the measurement stuff as much, and so they're just reporting their subjective experiences, which is fine. But I think everybody generally thinks that, I mean, maybe not everybody, at least. Oh, can you guys still hear me? Did my camera die? I may have knocked the cable. 1 second, guys. All right. We're back, but the screen has gone all funny. That's really weird that happened. It's never happened before. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know. I think I bumped the cable that was connecting the camera to the computer. So if it happens again, that's my fault. But what was I saying? Yeah, I don't know of anybody who actually thinks that there's stuff that is not, that their experiences are being created by something that is not potentially measurable, or not physically a real thing, and even with that said, I've talked to a lot of people who will agree that their experiences might be flawed and fallible, and that they're being influenced by other things, like the biases that they get from how much something costs. I think that's huge. how something physically looks, all that stuff. And most of the people I talk to, again, this is anecdotal, but most of the people who I talk to about this will readily admit that that has an influence on their perception of this stuff. So, I don't think that there really is a divide between objectivist and subjectivist. I think I'm kind of repeating what a friend of mine has said as well on this subject. I think it's a good point that this is an unnecessary divide. It's an unnecessary schism because generally speaking, there's really only one camp. But the problem is that both sides will continue to create, let's say, straw man arguments against the other, and then that's why you have this this back and forth, which is not particularly great. But yeah, like of course, like if something is heard, it should be measurable. But I don't think the book has been closed on what that is. So basically, it's debate between those. In my mind, the debate breaks down like this: those who think the book has been closed on measurements, which, like, I think there's just a historical reason why that's a bad idea, a bad approach. And then there's those who think that the book is mostly written on this stuff, but there's still a 10% or something like that needs to be figured out. I think that's where I fit. I think that either we're not analyzing all the data we're capturing in terms of the right things fully, so we're not exhausting that, or we're not exhaustively measuring everything either. So it's one of those two things. And but yeah, like to put people like it definitely seems like there's a conscious effort to put people like me who hold that view into the same category as those who think that cables make a difference, that you could use a more expensive cable to open up the sound or something like that, which, to be fair, I think I haven't had that experience. I haven't heard anything like that. But even the people who I've talked to about that who do believe this don't think that that's some not unmeasurable property. They just believe that there's something that isn't being captured there as well. Now, in my opinion, I think they're just influenced by volume, because level is so important. Like if you it's something where, like, if somebody's listening at two different headphones at two different volume levels, they could easily think that the louder one was more detailed, even though it wasn't. Something like that, I think that has such a massive influence, and I don't think you can reliably assess something like a cable, because you have to swap, and it takes time. The auditory memory is not that great. So, anyways, let's get back on track here. Did I miss some super chats? I think I did. I'll get to those real quick. Okay, how would you compare the Stealth? Thanks, Marius, by the way. How would you compare the Stealth to the D8000 or D8000 Pro? So the D8000 Pro is more detailed. It has better macro contrast, better sounds, like more spacious and open sounding, is heavier, and has a worse frequency response. So I would take with EQ, I would take the D8000 Pro, but realistically, this is the thing. If someone would just hand me one or the other, I would probably, this is gonna sound like it doesn't make sense given that you guys know what I like, but I would probably actually take the Stealth because I really value comfort. And that's something that doesn't come across as strongly, I think, in the reviews when people are assessing just for sound quality. But like, as much as I like the detail of something like an LCD4 or a D8000 Pro, I value comfort probably more than anything else. I mean, not than anything else, but you know what I mean, right? Comfort is key, in my opinion. And so for that reason, I could see myself gravitating more towards the Stealth. And it's a closeback, and I am somebody who uses closebacks commonly. McSpishy, thank you. Wow, that's very generous. Have you touched on the Modius stack before? Sorry if you have, but I'm new to the audiophile space and I can't find your take on it. I'm curious to hear your opinion. I've reached out to those guys, but I think they're just so busy they weren't able to get back to me. So I haven't had a chance to try them yet. But I do have an ABX comparison box, so if I do get one in, I'll be able to make that blind testing comparison, which should be fun. But my take on it right now, because I've one of the amplifiers that I use for testing certain headphones is the Magni 3 Heresy. And I think for those like good enough setups, the HiFiMan Sundara and an amplifier setups, the Modius Magnius stack is probably I would do something like that personally, unless you like there's something going on with the new Zen cans. There's some HiFiMan Zen can that I have to check out. That might be interesting, but because there's a bass boost function on those that might sort of work well with the HiFiMan Sundara. But that type of thing is what I would do. Modius Magnius stack, and maybe put in the future get a Lokius and put it there as well, because that would line up. I think it would be great. And then Evan, thank you. Best focal for hard rock and metal music. For reference, I currently have the LCD2 Classic and 650s for those genres. Best focal for hard rock and metal. Radiance? Someone tell me if that's a spicy take. Sorry, I'm gonna have to move the camera here. It is getting warm. Get a little closer. You guys get the full Andrew here. Just 4K. No, we're not at 4K. We're at 2K. Rob, thank you as always. Thank you for your support. All right, now back to the questions here. Which keyboard is that? Yeah, this is the Drop Control bare bones kit with the Holy Pandas. I did lube them up. I have some thoughts on them so far. I actually really like the feel of them. My only complaint is that I don't know if this is just like the nature of these switches or there are defects, but like occasionally I find a switch that like the actuation like hits twice somehow, and I thought it was the PCB, or well, actually the gentleman from Drop thought it was the PCB, so he sent me another PCB and I swapped it out, and I still have the issue. So I don't know, but as far as the feel is concerned, these are the best feeling switches I've ever used. It could also be the keycaps here, just my typing style, so it could be user error on that front. But yeah, I like these a lot better than the 65 gram Zelios. The Zelios were too stiff. But yeah, the feel is top notch for me. Better than the electrocapacitive stuff that I'd used before. So like the Topra and whatever. So I quite like these, but I still need to. I'm sure there's more that I need to try out as well. But I am like full light tactile. I can't stand the linear switches and I can't stand stiff switches. So keep that in mind. Let's see, guys. If I missed your question from before, please feel free to ask it again, because the camera issues happened. So. What headphone's being shown in the thumbnail? That's the Meze Elite. It's the new one from Meze. It's based on the Empyrean. You had the same issue with the Drop Control. Okay, so I'm not crazy. So I think what they should do is if it is the switches, and I'm not sure it is, but if it is the switches, I think they should just like send people more. They do send extras, so you get like a handful of extras, but I think they should send more if it is the switches. Otherwise, if it's the PCB, I'd love to see like maybe a firmware or something like that. But it doesn't. I don't think it's the PCB, because I swapped the PCB out, so I don't know what the answer is. It takes all the power in Andrew's house to drive the stealths. Yeah, the stealths, they need an amplifier. Yeah. I mean, all these DCAs, they benefit from power. Yeah. So with the stealth, actually, it was interesting. I was using the IHA6 with the stealth for a bit, because it's something that because I used to own the Aeons, and one of the things that I noticed with it was it got quite a bit better on the IHA6, compared to, I can't remember what else I was using, Micro Black Label. Both had enough power, but it sounded quite a bit better balanced on the IHA6. But one thing I've noticed now, having more amplifiers to compare with, like I was comparing the Vioelectric HPA V550 and some of the other stuff there, and the A90 as well. One of the things I noticed is that what the IHA6 tends to do is the soundstage is like, at least with the DCAs, is it kind of narrows the soundstage a bit and gives it much more of a depth effect. So it's like you're looking much more further forward into the music, which is kind of a cool thing. Compared to the HPA or the Vioelectric, it didn't have the depth, but it had more of the width, I guess. So that's a thing. You guys are talking all about keyboards now. Well, by the way, yeah, the reason why, so I haven't had any videos out lately because I had dental surgery, or like an implant surgery on my jaw for a tooth. It's like a back molar, so you couldn't even see it anyways. But that is some of the most excruciating pain that I've ever been in my life. Like the like once the freezing came out, because they drill a screw into your bone marrow. So I was, while they did, it was all frozen and everything, but like I've been on T3s and codeine and the Tylenol codeine things for the last couple of days, so I've definitely been out of it. It's made it difficult to film things. Timothy, oh, I see Alexander's. I'll answer yours in a second. Good afternoon from Sugarland, Texas. That's a great name for a place. What do you think of the new Meze Audio Elite? Is it worth the upgrade? So if you don't have an Empyrean and you were going to get an Empyrean, I think the Elite makes more sense. I just think it's flat out better in every respect. But if you already do own an Empyrean, it's similar enough that I don't think it's worth it to do. I wouldn't do it. And also, with that said, like this is certainly not sound quality for money. Like, you're not getting the best bang for the buck for $4,000 with that. What you're getting with the Elite is a generally pleasant sound with really good build quality and comfort, just like the Empyrean. It's just a little better there. Like, think about, I want to make some comparison with like LCD2F and LCDX or something like that, but that doesn't really work because the frequency responses are not completely fine there either. So, but you get the idea. It's like a small step up. Meze Elite versus the HE1000 SE. The SE is more detailed. The SE also has a worse frequency response, at least the one that I tried, because they may have done some revisions since then. That always sort of happens. Yeah, the HE1000 SE is a very detailed headphone, but the frequency response is way too insane in the treble for me. Can we expect an 8xx review anytime soon? Apparently I'm on the list, but I don't know if or when I will. I mean, I honestly wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me if they take a look at that and go, we should just go back to the original HT800S, and because at this point, there's like literally every reviewer, apart from like one or two, have said, why would you do this? And the frequency response also shows that. So, part of me hopes that they just say, okay, we're gonna remove the tape, we'll go back to the original just single Helmholtz resonator, and just ship a cheaper HD800S, and then that would be great. But yeah, so apparently I'm on the list for the 8xx, but I'd say the people to sort of follow on this are the ones who are indicating the frequency response. So I haven't fully watched Crin's review, but I imagine what he's said is fairly accurate. DMS as well, I know he's coming up with a review probably this weekend. So yeah, I would probably watch out for those. Is the Audeze Carbon a Stax killer? So if you're asking versus the SR007, my answer is no. Um, if you're asking versus, see, I can't tell you about those like L700s and all that stuff because I haven't had those to compare, so I haven't, you know, I've heard those once at CanJam, so it's not a fair comparison. Um, but yeah, the Carbon. I had my sort of initial impressions there, but I've been chatting with a little bit with one of the engineers over at Audeze about the tuning and stuff like that. So my take on it right now is that it is more of an alternative to it's like an E-stat without the E-stat timbre, but at the same time it also loses out a little bit on some of the detail that those, at least in the treble, that some of those other ones have. So it's a trade-off that I don't know if I'm quite willing to make. I mean, my bigger sort of contention there is like it's less about that. I mean, that's definitely sort of how I see it, but like more than that, I don't know why I would choose the Carbon over one of Audeze's planars, apart from the comfort and the weight, because it is quite a bit lighter, and it's a beautiful headphone. It's one of the best looking headphones I've ever seen. But I don't like to me, if you can handle the weight of an LCD4, I would just do that because I think that it's more detailed, and then you just EQ the LCD4, something like that, you know. You found the Elite and the Empyrean fairly different. You like the Elite way more. It is better. I think it's, you know, enough better that I would choose it over the Empyrean. But I don't think they're that different. I mean, actually, the measurements confirm this. They have the same general frequency response. The only difference is that the Elite is way more balanced in the treble. It's not as like piercing in that 10K region. It's a lot more balanced with the mid treble, and then it's not as bloomy and soupy in the bass either. So you get a more refined presentation overall. It's still got that weird driver mode thing at around 400 hertz, but I would take that over the bloom and the bleed into the lower mids there. Lucas Rocha, thank you. Thoughts on the D8000 Pro versus the Stealth versus Elite? The most technically impressive out of all of those is the D8000 Pro. The best frequency response out of all of those is the Stealth. The most comfortable out of all of those is the Elite. So they each have their strengths, I suppose. I mean, this is the other thing too. Like I was just saying before, like a part of me gravitates more to the Stealth on that, in that list, because of the fact that it's a closed back and it's portable. So I have a use case for the Stealth that the other two wouldn't really be able to satisfy. So if you're looking for something where you're just sitting down at home and you can use an open back headphone, you don't care about disturbing anybody else, and you're not listening for 6 hours at a time, which is fair enough excessive, then the D8000 Pro with EQ makes the most sense there. And you can maybe get like a little headband padding piece like this thing, I don't know, make it more comfortable. And the Elite obviously is very comfortable, so that's another consideration. The Elite, I'd say, is the most comfortable, out of all of those. But if you're in a situation where you're looking for like an office headphone where you're working and you're wearing headphones all day, I mean, in my case, I'm editing videos all day, generally. Editing videos, working all day, or just doing something where I'm wearing headphones all day. And so for that purpose, the Stealth is the clear winner there. So I think just make the assessment based on that, not necessarily sound quality, because that's the same thing. Like, I would, out of all of those, at $4,000, I'd probably still take a Focal Utopia if use case was not in it, like if it didn't matter what the use case was. Those metal dental screws might interfere with headphone magnets. What's funny is I actually asked the dentist about that, and she laughed. She thought that was hilarious. And then I had to explain how much of a nerd I was. Well, I I downplayed that. But yeah. Wait, that's all for the new X? Wait, what do you? Are you talking about the X as the new? Wait, the Stax thing? Oh, LCD-X. Okay. I think that's what you're talking about. Mechanical head pens. What's the best gaming headphone? The most reasonably attainable gaming headphone, the one that I would buy for gaming, would be something like a 560S. Decent, it's cheap, decent soundstage. It's good for music too. Plus, it's a little forward there in the like upper mids, lower treble, like 5K lower treble area. More like 4K. It's a little bit hot there, and you get that extra clarity there for footsteps and stuff like that. So for me, that's kind of what I would do. But I also think that generally good sounding headphones are going to be generally good for gaming. As long as you don't have like the really tight claustrophobic kind of thing going on. But some people are actually okay with that too. So, it depends on what you get used to. There is an argument that the HD800S is great for gaming as well, right? So, yeah, for me, I don't think you need to spend that crazy amount, to get something that's like, you're not going to get some extra crazy competitive advantage by doing that. I don't think. I think I used to think that, but spending more time with it and doing that. Man, I'm hyped for Battlefield 2042 or whatever it's called, coming out soon. Gonna get back into playing some games. I did some gaming on our Twitch channel actually, but I was just playing StarCraft, so which I should do again. I should spend more time on that. Maybe I'll do that after this stream. Maybe we'll go over there and play some video games, because we have a channel. It's just we haven't done anything with it. Let's see what's next. Alex, thanks. Meze Elite versus Utopia. For sound quality, Utopia every day. It's just flat out better. For comfort, Meze Elite for sure. Yeah, like people keep asking about the Elite, and it's a fair question. How much better is it for the like technical, subjective stuff than the original? To me, when I was comparing them, it did sound more incisive and more detailed, but it wasn't as much of an improvement as the tonal balance and frequency response improvements were. Like, that was the more salient thing to me. And so it went from a headphone like in the Empyrean, where I just like, I don't want to say unlistenable, but for me it was just, I didn't like it, it wasn't for me, to something where I went, oh yeah, I can get into this for sure. But if you're asking me about what the best headphones sound quality wise are at around $4,000, the Utopia is in that conversation, and I don't think the Meze Elite is. The Meze Elite, like sound quality wise, again, you can probably find something that is as good or better under $2,000, or around that, for just sound quality. Andrew, you need a Leopold to be a true StarCraft pro. I used to have one. I also had a Philco Magistouch TKL with the Browns. But yeah, I used to have a Leopold. Tools of the trade, man. When you're StarCraft pro, failed StarCraft pro. In HD800S and Apex Legends, you can hear the entire map. Yeah, I think that a lot of it also with gaming comes down to the game audio. If you're playing games in whatever the, not Black Ops, but with the Cold War. No, what's the Warzone? The audio in that is so bad that it kind of doesn't really matter. You're like, maybe you'll hear a little bit more, but like the game audio, positional audio is the detracting factor there. Whereas if you're talking about something like CS:GO, then that's a different question. The 43AG alone is something like $9,000, I think, and then you have to also get the KB5000. So I think your total and you need two of them. So I think around $10,000 for the entry into industry standard measurement equipment for headphones is around $10,000. Yeah. But I hope, one day we get something like a 5128 or, whatever new standard gets set by the 5128 from B&K. I'm very curious to try that out. You guys can hear the cars outside, windows open. Because the thing is, like, we need to have some standard for the 5128 or something to measure headphones on the 5128 against. We need a reference point. And Jude's been doing a good job with other headphones. That's really all he's done so far, is compared it to other headphones. But, because he doesn't have the resources of, Harman to conduct a study, right? And apparently Sean Olive is doing that, but he's not... it's not going to be public information, unfortunately, which makes a certain amount of sense. It's market research, right? But I would love to see it. I have a pretty good idea of what it would be too. And I think, so here's the thing, I think we could do it. I think we could create basically a high-res version of the Harman target on the 5128. I think we could. And one way of doing it, I think probably the more airtight, ironclad way of doing it would be, the Harman research way. And it also would potentially validate the previous results, because a lot of that does end up doing that. But I think even just based on the information that we already have from that research, I think there might be a way to, extrapolate a high-res version of that target. Because keep in mind, Harman is smooth to like 1/3 or 1/2 octave, whereas headphone measurements are generally not. And so the question there would be like, well, what would happen if you didn't if the target itself wasn't smooth? What would it look like? And then add to that, what it would need to be on the 5128. I mean, specifically, if you look at the Harman treble, right, that's just wrong. Like the upper treble, where you see like the sort of dip above 10K. The reason why that happens is because the measurement rig that was being used wasn't rated for accuracy above 10K, and so the results that they got were likely quite skewed. And so, this is one place where it doesn't matter if it matches the target. Like, yes, it matters if it's like ridiculous and totally not even close to that kind of balance, because we're talking about balance between fundamental and harmonics when we're making that assessment of overall tonal balance. But so it needs to be somewhere in the ballpark, but like it does not need to match that drop. So when people say like, oh yeah, the Harman target rolls off in the upper treble, I think that's accurate, and I don't think that would be all that contentious. Like I know there's a number of people who just don't report that information above 10K, and I think it's because of that. So it makes a certain amount of sense to me. HD560S or DT990/DT880 are good for gaming, I guess. Yeah, I think those are probably fine for gaming, but out of those I would pick the 560S because it's the more even frequency response. The DT880 and 990 are too weird in the treble for me. I know that there are some people who really like those headphones though, and they will fight to the death to preserve their status as, elite level headphones. But I just say on a personal level, I've tried all of them and didn't particularly like the 880 and the 990. So I think also like the PC38X, although no, the soundstage is a bit blobby for that one, bit 3 blobby, but the frequency response is solid on it. I'm trying to think if there's something else around there. Yeah, like we're talking competitive stuff. I think those are all fine for gaming, To a certain extent, that DT880, maybe like a 600 ohm or something like that with an amplifier, would be the way to go. But then, yeah, that starts to get a bit more expensive. 560S, you don't need an amplifier, I don't think. It's 120 ohm. But, so I think most computers could run it, although it would still benefit from one. Actually, I've got a video coming out about that tomorrow. All right, let's see some more super chats in here. Thank you, Ald. Can you compare the Utopia and Stealth on these two parameters, bass, soundstage? All right, bass. bass level is perfect. Bass is essentially perfect on the Stealth, but bass quality is better on the Utopia. Bass, meaning that it has that the Utopia is one of the slammiest headphones, like the punchiest headphones you can find. It's not elevated, it's not boosted like the Stealth is. So if you want more bass level, then the Stealth is the way to go. But for that sort of sense of, take your head off and, punch, the Utopia is, like I can't off the top of my head think of a punchier headphone than the Utopia. Especially on certain combinations with certain amplifiers, like running it off of the Forge, I was like, good lord. It's just nuts. So I think that's really how you got to look at that, right? If you want more bass, you go with the Stealth. If you want punchier, more dynamic bass, then you would go with the Utopia. Soundstage. And for soundstage, the Utopia is not particularly spacious. I'd actually say, and the Stealth. So I'm gonna say that they're both medium, but I think that the Stealth. Yeah, I mean, it's impressive because it doesn't sound like that sort of claustrophobic closed back kind of thing. But it's not like it was more spacious than typical open back headphones for me. And the Utopia, like all those Focal headphones are not, soundstage is not their strength, I don't think. I mean, it's reasonably even for its distribution of images, but it's not like a spacious HD800S or, HiFiMan Aria or Meze Empyrean kind of, or Elite kind of, soundstage. Like that's really the advantage of some of those. Felix, Ross and Rad Zero or Utopia used? I see. I'm not a fan of buying used headphones because you never know what somebody's had them on their dog or something, or they stepped on by a donkey because they had it in the farm. I don't know. Like you never know what people have done with used headphones. So that's I'm not a fan of that. Although we have one here, so this is used, bought used because it's the only place you can buy it. But my answer is. It should be based on what your priorities are. If you want a warmer, more relaxed presentation, and if you listen to a lot of, rock and metal and pop and beat genres, and you want that planar kind of separation quality, then maybe the Rad Zero. But if you want the punch and the detail and I want to say more like clarity focused presentation that has ear gain, upper mid range and stuff like that, then the Utopia is like that more sort of analytic and incisive presentation. The Utopia is that. So I don't think it's. Oh, also the comfort is a big thing too, because I find so if you have a big head, that might be an issue. Although actually talking to Alex about that, he said that you could theoretically, adjust the clamp. So I probably just didn't do that when I was doing my review. So I think that's basically how I would kind of compare those two. That's if you ever want to nerd out about WoW. I that's not for me. Like I was a competitive SC2 player, and that's really the only thing. Well, I used to play competitive shooters as well, but like when I say competitive, I mean like the ultra, like top 50 North America type stuff with SE2, and I didn't take anything else anywhere near as seriously. Like at the time, it was like that was when the big esports bubble was happening, and there was a chance that I could have made money doing it, and so at that time it was worth taking that seriously, because I don't think the timing was right for me with anything else where I was like playing video games. Honestly, one of the things that ASR needs to do is an objective study on how damaged headphones get after running them over with a car. Yeah, that's legit. Comments on the Sendy Peacock. The one that I heard, I sent it back to those guys because they sent it over, and I gave them some feedback, and then they said they would send another revised one, but I haven't heard from them since. So I don't know if I don't know if they're working on a new revision, but the one that I heard was basically I agree with what DMS said about that one. Yeah, and yeah, I posted some of the measurements up on some of the forums there. But again, like if they send another one and then it's and they want me to review that one, then I will review that one. But yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll post the measurements of the new one. You guys are asking about the Elite a lot versus the Utopia. Is the Meze Elite as good as the Utopia? For sound quality, no. But for comfort, yes, it's better. Ooh, thinking about picking up the Aeon Noir to pair with the Zencan. I don't know. Good question. Maybe. Check the power output on that and whether that is sufficient, because the Noir does take quite a bit of power. I actually don't have a Zencan on hand to, and I don't off the top of my head remember what the actual power output is of the Zencan. Actually, I want to say probably it'll be good enough. Probably. Let's see what else. Come on, guys, let's get some spicy questions. How's the detail retrieval of the HiFiMan HE6se compared to the Aria? So, under no circumstances can I recommend the HE6se V1, but the HE6se V2 is legitimately great for that 600 and whatever price. At the original price of like 1700 or 1800, I've got a bit of a hard time with that. But at $700, that's crazy. And compared to the Aria, it's more just different, you know. The HE6se V2, it's almost like it has a tighter kind of presentation, like tighter and more aggressive, whereas the Aria is a bit of more of like a softer, more refined kind of presentation. I don't know how else I would describe that, but the Aria is definitely better for soundstage and depth and separation and all that stuff. But there are good, I can see reasons to prefer the HE6se V2 over it, for the overall frequency response, or that sort of like extra tightness aspect to it. So that's why the AB1266 had distortion. It was run over by a Jeep. No, I'm pretty sure they didn't use that one. No, it's weird, that it does have high distortion. I don't think it would be audible though. Or at least if it's audible, it's not individually audible. Maybe like there's a contributing factor there to the overall experience somehow. But I don't think you'd be able to be like that. There's the distortion in when you're listening to music. $660 post-tax for the HE6se V2. That's, what are we doing? I mean, to a certain extent, I can see why somebody would like the Alex more. But like, yeah, that's a good deal. Keeping up with padware is annoyingly costly. Aeolus pretty much replaces my HD650, so I might sell it now that it won't get much use possibly. I gotta get one of those in, man. That's I like the one that I heard, so, but the question is how's the mid treble? It's funny, like when looking at frequency response stuff, very often I see people comment on where they see a deviation from a target and go, okay, that's clearly bad. But oftentimes, or they'll see a few deviations and they say it's bad, but oftentimes one deviation can actually kind of make another deviation more innocuous. Like it's still there, it's still noticeable, but like, what do I mean by this? If you Metal and I were talking about this in the past, but like if you have something that is elevated in the upper mid range, for example, it is worse if the mid treble is recessed. It is made more noticeable when the mid treble is recessed. However, it is made less noticeable if the upper treble is boosted. So that kind of compensates for those harmonics being kind of like a little bit, a little bit imbalanced in one area. You can kind of compensate for that by having it be a little bit imbalanced in another area. If that makes sense. A great example of this is the Drop Panda. It doesn't deviate that much, but it deviates in one area, and then it sounds muffled and congested and closed in and claustrophobic because it doesn't have the treble to compensate for where it deviates. Same thing to a much lesser degree. There are other headphones that do this as well. Like thinking of the R70X. When some people hear that as being a little bit shouty, that's because it's just not properly compensating for the upper mid-range boost that it has. Let's see. Going to CanJam SoCal 2021. Anything I should bring? What should I expect? Also looking for amp for the Allegia. Should I bring it to CanJam? Anything to look out for? Bring a mask. Hand sanitizer. I don't know if there's anything in particular you should, like headphones to bring. I honestly, I wouldn't even bother bringing the Allegia. An amp for the Allegia, I think something with a bass boost function, one of the IFI ones, would be solid. You don't need much. Is it worth getting an amp if you're just trying to use an easy to drive IEM? It's worth getting a source, but it doesn't have to have high power. Yeah, but it's worth removing that from, like a laptop headphone jack, for example. They're like the Realtek controllers there. They're often pretty bad. But otherwise, I am a proponent of the dongle. Dongle life. Or one of those. There's that new IFI thing, the blue whatever. I can't remember what it's called. If Sebastian's watching, send one over. I'll do a review. Because I've been using the Radson ES100 for a long time for IEM use, for portable IEM use, and I love it. I think it's amazing. But if there's something smaller that is better, because that's pretty old at this point. Yeah, I think there's one from Theo too. Somebody's mentioned that as well. I like this mug. It has flowers on it. It's a very simple and clean. Makes me feel like I'm in the jungle. Okay, maybe not the jungle. Somewhere in nature. Best $4,000 for a headphone for classical piano, particularly. Yeah, I actually really like the Utopia for piano. I like the way that sounds. Other than that, if you can swing a little bit more, go with the Sosfaro, the $6,000, or ask somebody if they can sell it for $4,000. I don't know. But yeah, and then you need an amplifier too. How do the Audeses perform in terms of soundstage in comparison to the HiFiMans, for example? It probably depends which HiFiMans you mean, because the HE6se stuff is not about soundstage, but the Aria is. So I'd say compared to the Aria, the Audeze stuff's not as spacious sounding. In general, they all have kind of a similar soundstage, where I'd say it's good, but it's not, like it's not claustrophobic or anything, doesn't detract, but it's also not as crazy as like a HE800S or an Aria. Is the Stealth worth $4,000? So this was my contention. I mentioned it earlier, that like it all really depends on what your use case is, because there really is nothing else like the Stealth on the market other than the Noir, right? That's the only other thing that's kind of like that. And so in that sense, sure, it's worth $4,000 because it's better than the Noir, and it's the only thing that's like it, so they can justify whatever price they want. But at the same time, the Noir already has a very good frequency response. It's already quite detailed. It's not as good as the Stealth in those aspects, but it's already quite good. So if that use case is not a primary use case for you, then I don't think it's worth the $4,000. You might as well just get the Noir. But if that's your sole use case, and you would never be able to use something like a Utopia or Sysvara or some of these open back and whatever the flagship headphones, right? Open back flagship headphones. If you're never going to do that, or if you're never going to EQ anything, that's another consideration, because it's one of the few flagships that does have really good frequency response. Then absolutely it's worth it. If you want to get the best by default frequency response, close back, portable, lightweight, comfortable, planar magnetic headphone, that's the Stealth, because nothing else, it doesn't have any competition. And that's the other key thing there, is that just a little, wow, okay, I'm gonna get rid of that person. I think that was the right person. I hope I banned the right person. There we go. That's fun. But yeah, I was gonna say, you have it's not unique to the Stealth. This is an idea that persists in not just headphones either, every industry. If you think that a thing that you've produced is even a little bit better than everything else that is a like thing, then you would feel justified in pricing it at whatever you want, because for people who care enough to get the very best, you're at the very least, you think that they are going to spend that kind of money to get whatever it is that you've produced. The bigger question in my mind comes when you have more competition, and then and there is competition now at the high end. But it used to be just like the Focal Utopia at $4,000 or something like that, right? So, and then obviously Sennheiser had that crazy stuff up there for a long time too. But yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why we see these prices creeping up. I mean, the other reason is that it's honestly easier to produce headphones at that price, because you don't have to produce as many. And if you don't have the ability to produce as many, then it makes more sense to make an ultra high-end headphone than something that is going to be mass consumed. But personally, I fall somewhere in the middle. To me, I'd be perfectly happy buying something under $2,000. I think that's where I would kind of land for my own purchase. I know I own a headphone that costs more than that, but not much more. But you know what I mean, right? I like the idea of, if I'm going to get a high-end thing, I want it to be awesome. I want it to be flagship level, and I don't need it to be the literal best thing that could possibly exist, because you can always get something that's better. You can always get an HE, the Sennheiser HE1 or whatever it is, or a Shangri-La Senior or something ridiculous, right? Kevin, any news on this month's giveaway? Yes, I do, and actually I'll have a video coming out about that tomorrow. The giveaways page isn't up yet, but I am going to work on that today, so it should be up at least by tomorrow. And what we're doing actually is we're giving away 4 headphones for the same headphone, not just to one person, because that would be really dumb. Here's 4 headphones. We're giving away 4 HD560S headphones. And for each winner, we're also giving a Zendak V2. Zendak V2. Because that's a combination that makes a ton of sense. Because you have, the 560S doesn't require a ton of power. Zendak V2, it also doesn't have a ton of power. It's got an amplifier output there, though, right? So you can run it. And it's got enough power for the 560S. Plus, it has the bass boost function there. So some thought went into this. So it's still a high dollar amount giveaway. We're just spreading it out across 4 different winners instead of 1 winner. Kennerton Rognir versus the Stealth. I always like the Kennerton names. So no, I have not had a chance to hear the Rognir. I was notified of it. Someone mentioned it on the forum that it's another planar closeback. I'm not particularly encouraged by what I've heard from the candidate stuff so far, because it seems like they don't hear the trailing ends of tones question, like the, bluntedness or absence of bluntedness, for detail, and they are fans of front deriver damping on the ones that I've heard so far. But that doesn't mean that, they can't blow me away with the next thing that I hear from them. So it's just that I haven't heard it yet. With all these headphones touching 4 to 6K, the Verite... Wait, what? Oh, the Verite open/closed looks like a deal. Again, I've said this before. If I were to do it again, I would get the Verite closed, because I think it has a better frequency response overall. Plus, it has the use case function of closed back as well. So that's what I would do. And yeah, the Verite closed is in that conversation for me. Like, I've heard it enough times. Like, I don't own it, and I don't... I mean, I would like to. It's tempting. As much as I like the open with my EQ profile and stuff, the closed is something I covet. Yeah. That's in the conversation for me for, like, end game closed back headphones, along with the stealth. Thoughts on the HD8xx? Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. I haven't heard it yet, but I just think I wish they would just take the tape off. Sell a cheaper HD800S and we all would win. Okay. Why not Zen's signature with the Sundara? I have no access to that, so I do not know. But yeah, that would be a great idea as well. In the future, we might do that, something like that. There's been such little spice in today's stream. I'm surprised. Not sure what you mean by favorite transient response. Are you talking about impulse response? Because that's not something we need to worry about. I want something true wireless, and I'm ready to pull the trigger on the WF-1000XM4. I know in general true wireless is not as good as wired, but sound quality wise, what price point do the XM4 compete in, including the wired sets? Also keep in that conversation one of the Galaxy Buds. I can't remember which one it was, but I think actually Theo did a good breakdown of that on the channel. What price point for sound quality? $100. I mean, that's the thing, right? The Moondrop stuff exists, right? And that stuff's pretty cheap. It's like around $100, even less. And yeah, it's typically better than most, if not all, true wireless stuff. How do you like the Noir? I like the Noir. This isn't the Noir, though. This is the Aeon X closed from Drop. A little more here. We'll go for another... Oh yeah, we've only been going for an hour and a half, so we'll go for another 20 minutes. Jake, what's up? Can anyone recommend a desk chair with a headrest that doesn't touch/push on the headphone earpads? I saw you post that, and I actually read through the thread because it's something that I want people to start making, is like chairs that have headrests that have like indents for where the cups would be for your headphones. I think that would be amazing. Audiophile chairs. I mean, right now the audiophile chairs people always get are like the IEMs chairs. But those are, I don't know if they're purpose built for this necessarily for headphone use. Yeah, maybe someone can 3D print something like that and put a cushion on it. I don't know. But I'm currently using the Aeon chair, but I need to get a new one because this one is it's like over 15 years old now, 16 years old, and they're only supposed to last for like 12. So the hydraulic system's kind of dying on it, and yeah, it's just creaky. Just Ed, thank you. Do you have a question? If you have a question, let me know. I do not see it, but thank you. There is controversy of reviews for the Civic Phoenix. What is your take? I did not know there was controversy. What was the controversy? I actually have a Phoenix. Oops, camera out of focus. I have a Phoenix in the studio right now, and I was evaluating it, and I don't know if it would be my pick, but it was okay. It was, fine. It's a cheap. It's inexpensive. Like it's not something where I'm particularly, concerned that much in it. There's a lot. You could certainly do a lot worse than the Phoenix. How are impulse response and transient response different? I don't quite know what you mean by transient response. Like, do you mean like a subjective sense of immediacy and speed? The problem with impulse response is that all those additional metrics, not all, but like, so for example, supposedly impulse response, cumulative spectral decay, like the waterfall graphs and all that stuff, it's just another way of looking at frequency response. And you can actually you can fix issues in CSD with by fixing the issue in FR, or more, perhaps better said, if issues show up in CSD, though it would also reveal potentially, most likely reveal an issue in FR, and that's because headphones are minimum phase devices, are supposed to be minimum phase devices. I see that, to me, is where there's a little bit of distance, or a little bit of the door is ajar slightly for that question, because maybe headphones aren't all perfectly minimum phase, but and then it would get interesting. I don't know completely on that, but yeah, I think it's funny because we used to do those measurements before knowing fully what that meant. Math people will know impulse responses in the FR in time domain. Yeah, exactly. And we learned that a long time ago. Well, a couple of years ago at least. But yeah, there's other stuff like that as well that Tile used to measure stuff like square wave and stuff like that, and it's not actually, yeah, it's not actually as meaningful. Atri, wow, your take on Elite versus Utopia as a complement to the VC. Okay, so this is a question that Elite versus the Utopias, I've answered this a few times, but these are not in the same conversation for sound quality for me, even though they're priced similarly. If you care a lot about comfort, you go with the Elite. If you care a lot about detail and slam and sound quality, you go with Utopia. The other advantage that the Elite has over the Utopia is soundstage. So if you really want a more spacious presentation, then the Elite would be the way to go, yeah. Because the Utopia soundstage is not the most spacious. But yeah, I don't think the Elite competes with the Utopia for either frequency response or detail or punch. Although, I suppose if you've already got the VC, you might want to look at a planar, yeah. So that might make sense. I do support that idea. But if that were me, I don't know how much actual head time the Elite would get if you already have a VC. Yeah, I'm not sure. Spicy take. What's the most toxic headphones community? Reddit, HeadFi, or other? Take out YouTube comments. That's cheating. Damn it. Okay. The most toxic? So I am going to cheat as well here. There are a number of Discord communities that are particularly horrible. Like, and I'm not talking about the ones that I participate in, because I do my best to stay away from as many Discords as I can, because I think that platform has a tendency to bring out the worst in people. It causes people to think that whatever they're typing is just gone into the ether, so they're more likely to say, horrific things. And there's sort of like there's a culture of, shitting on brands and being mean because it's cool to do in a lot of Discord communities, that it's almost like seeing how much you can kind of one up the other person or whoever else it is on how how much you can say something sucks. And so I think a lot of those Discord communities are just rife with that those issues. So if you're talking about toxic communities, I think that's where that's at. As far as communities that are more wrong than anything else, weirdly, I see Reddit stuff on Reddit being very, very, very wrong, and then occasionally someone like Oratory will come in there and correct people. But there's a lot of stuff in there that's just like, whoa. How did you think that was true for this long? But it's okay to be wrong. It's more just like, what do you do with the information when you are presented with the correction of that? But yeah, for whatever reason, I see Reddit as having a lot of just like, oh, okay. But I wouldn't really say that that's toxic. I think that's just like, misinformed about certain things. Or like you'll have a lot of people there where they will make judgments and pronouncements about headphones without ever having heard them, just by looking at the frequency response, and then also doing that analysis incorrectly, essentially. For reasons like they might not know about the 9K dip needing to be there on anything that's been measured with the anthropometric pinna, the KP5000, or anything that has that same ear. So stuff that they wouldn't necessarily know about. It's not their fault, but they still kind of like scream it from the mountaintop. I don't say ASR on that, because I see somebody they're saying ASR on Reddit. It's not, ASR isn't the problem. It's there's a lot of good, very well intentioned and informative people participating in ASR as well. So I think it's more like there are certain, there's sometimes things in ASR go off the rails, and it's usually because of one person in particular and a handful of followers. But no, there's a lot of great information there too, so I don't want to say it's ASR. And certainly there's useful data there too, so yeah. What I mean about transient is thinking about speed and attack, unless transient and speed are actually different. I think subjectively, no, they're related, but I don't think you can. I don't know of any way to measure that right now. I haven't kept up. Is Cato replacing the Aria? No. Arya is Arya. The Moondrop IEM. Losing my voice. The Cato is replacing the KXXS, so it's around $190, I think, something like that. And we should be getting one in sometime soon. I'm not sure when exactly. I preferred the Starfield as well. I know a lot of people were like, "Oh yeah, the." See, the thing is, I preferred the Aria's frequency response. I thought it was more balanced tuning, but at the same time, I thought the Starfield had more detail, so that was and a little more punch. I don't know. A lot of Reddit likes to crap on Abyss now because of a few driver pictures. Yeah. I mean, those driver pictures were not all that flattering. But that's just the thing. Like, there's a lot of like just stuff that is unknown, that people like to jump to conclusions about, rather than going, "Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why," and then asking that question, and then pinging Oratory or somebody who might know. And actually, to be fair, in that thread, I think think Oratory did comment. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but some expert I think did comment on that as well. Will you be getting in the new IEM from 64 Audio and Empire Ears to review? Most likely, yeah. I don't know if it'll be me reviewing them. It might be our IEM specialist, Theo. He's like I'm into IEMs as well. Don't get me wrong. Like I use IEMs like every day, but I wanna cover more over your headphones because we got a lot of folks on the team who are, IEM centric, and there's always tons of IEMs as well. So I sometimes joke that we're becoming IEMs.com because of the amount of IEM coverage that we do. But yeah, we will be getting those in. Hobbies and gatekeeping. Name a better combination. I mean, that's the thing. At the end of the day, it's like this is just headphones, man. Like and a lot. It's like so much of it is like if you like a thing, who cares what If I say something, there's a lot of people who hate that I was so critical of the DT1990 right years ago, and like even to this day I considered just taking that video down. It does not have a particularly favorable like to dislike ratio, but at the same time I still believe like most of what I said there. The only thing is I actually think that I was too charitable. Like I actually think that there is less of a pro application for that than I thought at the time. So it just doesn't make sense to me why somebody would choose that over a more reference tuned headphone. But the point being, if you like the DT1990, who cares what I say? Be happy, which I know is difficult to do because like a lot of this is centered around like purchase validation or that kind of stuff, and the bigger picture there includes that as like a pretty significant element, right, of the conversation. Did I buy something that is actually good, or was it just something that a certain person hyped up and was flavor of the month, and now we move on? Biswadeep, thank you. Hi Andrew, how are you? I'm good, except I seem to have lost my voice. Even yesterday when I was filming videos, I lost my voice a little bit. Maybe it's from the dental surgery trauma. Given the Stealth claims to be as open sounding as an open back. No, I said that. Oh, given the claims, right. The Stealth, I see what you're saying. Okay. How do they compare with the HE1000 SE? Can Elite sit with them in the same place? HE1000 SE is more detailed. It's more it's larger soundstage, larger presentation. Same thing. The Elite is more spacious, but the Elite I'd say is also not as technically impressive as the Stealth. But the Elite does have a more spacious presentation. So like for me, I have to kind of make sure that nuance is understood. I don't mean that it has a wide soundstage like an HD800S. What I mean is that it doesn't have the closed-in kind of sound that typical closebacks tend to give you. And part of that, in fact, I'd imagine a large part of that is due to the advanced metamaterials tuning system, or whatever they call it, with basically the sophisticated waveguide and resonator piece that they put in front of the diaphragm to fix the standing waves and the resonances and stuff like that. And interestingly, I had a opportunity to have a very informative chat with Dan about that, and asked him, more about that. And he indicated that most of the frequencies that get affected there are in the like lower treble and above. But the benefit of that piece is that you can be quite surgical with which frequencies you're affecting. And so to me, it's like I think that's kind of what's responsible for why it doesn't sound as kind of claustrophobic, as it doesn't have those same kinds of resonances, which I would imagine show up in frequency response, like they do on the LCD XC, for example. The time I knew you would go very far in this review space, Andrew, is when I saw you being able to change your mind and listen to people like Mad and Oratory. So many think they're always right. Open-minded willingness to learn is so important. I agree, but it's and thank you for saying that. But it's funny if I think back now to those previous days of reviewing how wrong I was about so many things, and so I think I mean, as you've stated, the willingness to change one's mind, but also like I think I mean, it's an important thing for not just reviewers, I suppose, but even just people who are kind of going along this journey as well, like the audiophile journey, to be okay with changing their own minds about things. Like another example would be like the Elegia, right? I having more experience now. I don't know if I'd say that that's a great headphone. I don't think, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, it's a headphone that like it did well at certain things at the time, and I liked it for those things at the time, but I would have a bit of a hard time without EQ on that one now, I'm trying to think of other examples, but that's it. That's an important point, being okay with being wrong, and changing one's mind and going back. Because I think more people need to be open to that as well. One of the things that like the whole question about like what else is there apart from frequency response and THD and the measured stuff that we have. So with the ABX box, that's one thing that I think will be an interesting thing. How affected are we by framing effects and biases when we start doing blind ABX testing? And I think that'll be an interesting thing to figure out, And it will. What I'm saying is, I imagine that will also reveal and uncover situations where my previous judgments about things have been wrong. But then, to me, it's like that's the interesting thing. It's like that's what you publish. It's like, turns out we were wrong about all these things, or at least as far as what the blind testing kind of reveals. Stormtrooper, thank you. If you could only have one headphone for EDM, would you take Macro Dynamics versus Soundstage, Focals versus Aria? Ooh, would a Forge fix some of the Aria? I don't know if I would frame it in terms of fix, because I don't think this is a quality that is ubiquitously negative. Like I don't think it is like perceived in a negative way across the board, because some people, especially like I'll give you an example. My dad loves listening to classical music. And I had him compare the Stelia with the Aria, and he loved the Aria and hated the Stelia, but I know tons of other people who they don't like, that planar kind of softness that the Aria has, and they much prefer the punch of something like a Stelia. So I think it's not a straightforward, better or worse there. But for EDM, I think you would best be suited with one of the Focals. That would be, that'd be my recommendation. DT1990 versus Sennheiser 560S. Which one have more details? They're not in the same ballpark, are they, for price? I would say probably DT1990. But the problem with the DT1990 is that the frequency response is ridiculous. I don't know of any other headphone that is that pronounced of a sibilance peak. I mean, I'm sure there is one, but at the moment I can't think of anything. Something else from Bayer maybe that. But even the 880 didn't have as strong of a sibilance peak. I should do a new updated DT1990 review with some of the Deconi pads that may have fixed that. But with that said, the HD560S, it doesn't have the sibilance peak like that, but it is a little bit forward there at around like 4-ish, 4.5K. So it does have some treble spice as well. So it probably depends on what you're sensitive to. But I think for detail, I think probably a DT1990 and an amplifier. I mean, that was the thing with the HD560S, is that it wasn't as competitive with the HE6se for detail. And even though it did quite a bit better for Soundstage. You don't need to worry about what reviewer X said really if you enjoy something yourself. Yeah. Yeah, so right now we're just doing ABX with amplifiers, like with source equipment. But I don't know how we would do that with headphones. Like, this is actually one of the things with the Harman research as well, is that in some ways, as much as I love the Harman research, and I'm really sad that the new stuff is not, going to be publicly available, or at least that's what it seems like. Maybe that's not entirely correct, but yeah. I When reading through it, there is one piece that kind of makes me feel like it is very difficult in that study to assess any of the things, any of that last 10% or whatever it is that you and I are talking about metal when we're talking about, things like detail. I think they set it up in a way where it was impossible for that to be part of the study. And I think you know why. It's their methodology did not allow for that. Because it was based on, it was already in the premise that they were basing it on strictly frequency response. So I think when they, and this is something I don't even imagine that Sean would disagree with that. But if ever a study were to exist where these types of things were investigated, which I think should happen, and I would love for Harman to do this. Maybe this is something that, he can incorporate into some future studies or something like that. But it would need to end up being something like what we've talked about, where, we take a HiFiMan Sysvara and put a Deva driver in it, because I think they're the same shape, and then have people, make sure that the frequency responses match, because they're not that different, and then put them on, do a test of, however many people, and just have them compare the two and see which one they preferred, and start there. So you're controlling for that particular, like, you're not saying, you're not breaking it down into the various different subjective components that audiophiles report. So you won't need to deal with any of the, language of detail, whatever. You're still just dealing with Sean's existing, like, what do people prefer? And then the result of that is, something along the lines of, did people prefer the $6,000 headphone to the, $150 or $200 headphone, all things being equal, right? And as long as you had some way of doing that, and I think it would, like, you and I think know the obvious answer there, but it would prove it, basically. It would prove, that there was a subjective preference for this, and then you have, at the very least, a foundational starting point for something there. and that would be just an example. I don't know, like, again, because there's also the question of distortion and whatnot. That's also operative, even though we know it's not responsible for subjective listener preference. So if they even said that, oh, hey, this one is subjectively more preferred because of lower distortion, that actively flies in the face of Harman's existing research on that very subject. So I don't know if they would be inclined to go that route. All they'd have to do is reference why it doesn't, they know that it doesn't have that correlation. But I think once you kind of set that up as, like, this is the foundational elements of this, like, you say, okay, disregarding whether it was detail or soundstage or dynamics or anything or separation, if you just say which one do you prefer, and that's all you're testing for, then once you have that figured out, that, oh, people did prefer this, then you know that there's something beyond frequency response, and you can have that referenceable. Is that a word, referenceable? You know what I mean, right? You can have that sort of as an established foundational part of this, and then the next thing that you do can basically follow from that. This person has returned. People don't necessarily think they're always right. Tricky part is they don't think they are. But even what they're absolutely convinced of isn't always correct, which is what some can't admit. Yeah, that's so. What you're saying there is, like, there's stuff that, like, there's, like, core things, that core believies, that might not be true, but people strongly believe them to be true. Those are the more difficult ones to shake than the ones that people are like, I think this might be the case, and so on. Like, for example, I mentioned that the hypothesis of, what's at least a necessary condition for macro contrast and slam and impact and that stuff, and what those conditions are, that's not something that I'm like firmly committed to. That's something that I want to explore because it seems like a necessary condition, right? So that's kind of how I see that. HiFi Zencan versus topping A90 headphone amp. A90 SE output power at 32 ohm is listed at 2 watts. HiFi Zencan is rated at 1.6 watts, single-ended at 32 ohm. Why does the HiFi Zencan have so much more volume? What? I don't know. What? It doesn't? Are you running it balanced? Are they both balanced? I don't... Oh, is that your question from before? Not really sure. I have not compared those two directly, so I couldn't tell you. But the A90 should have more power running it balanced, yeah. But also, I'm not a big fan of the... Wait. Oh, single-ended output. Sorry, I see what you're saying. I missed that part. Yeah, I don't know, then. You sure you're on high gain? I'm not sure what's going on there. It probably depends on the headphones that you're using. But I'm not sure what's going on there. All right, guys. Couple more questions. Let's get some spicy ones to end it with here. Yeah, it is something like I want to say not just grad school, because it's like I think even just like going to university and like going through that process of seeing just how much you don't know and getting some respect for the academic process there. I mean, certainly grad school helps, but having some respect for the academic process can, I think, it's a very humbling experience. Because you really you don't there's so much that we don't know, I like the approach of learning learning as you're doing things. So I'm trying to think of an example. If I find something, for example, understanding what the teal small parameters are, the the driver resonance frequency, that type of stuff, that stuff that even earlier this year I had no idea what that would have been, right? So talking with Matt and other folks about that and learning about that, and then having that be something that features in my reviews. I kind of see that as kind of taking a lot of the learning on board as we're doing it, right? I don't feel I needed to know that ahead of time, but it's something that now that I've learned about it, it's fascinating to me, and I don't see why I wouldn't include that now. And that's something that can help, I think, other people as well. It's something when I look at the measurements that are done out there these days, I generally see frequency response, and I see sometimes THD, but what I don't see that often is on-head response, and this I've never seen on-head response, and except from ratings. Ratings are the only ones who do on-head response for bass, which is pretty cool. And then free air or air gap behavior. But the other thing that I need to do as well is I need to get some speakers in the space to try and test isolation. But then also, I've got to test leakage and stuff like that too. So there is a best practices that I am hopeful to that I'm aiming towards, and hopefully one day reach. Why do some amps change tone but not frequency response? That's $1 million question. It's a great question. I've asked this to other people as well, because if you measure the frequency response, which by the way, like I'm hopeful to get into measuring amplifiers and stuff soon, like amplifiers and DACs and all that stuff. It's just that those systems are very expensive and not like it's not as meaningful as frequency response for headphones, but this is an interesting question. People say it changes tone. So I think there's a couple things going on. Either it doesn't change tone, but there's a narrative around something that makes you think that the tone is different. And then that, I mean, I don't mean to say there that like you're not actually, hearing that difference, but just that it's amazing how powerful those narratives can be. Or there is a change in tone, but that's a function of certain low order harmonic distortion products, which we did demonstrate in the Synad piece, where actually in the 315 hertz test tone example, where we had the same level of the same order of harmonic distortion and the same amount, we played the whole thing at two different volumes, and the whole tone shifted upwards. So when you have harmonic distortion there is, or just nonlinear distortion in general, it can affect the sort of psychoacoustic perception of tone there. So I think that could be responsible. Yeah, some sort of nonlinear distortion could be responsible. And there are manufacturers who are trying to conserve that stuff for the sake of having that sort of tonal affectation. What's your favorite spicy food? So this is the thing. I love spicy food. I love really spicy food. And my girlfriend is actually a Thai cook. But spicy food does not agree with me anymore. Ever since I went to South America and got food poisoning and completely ruined my health in general, I've had a much harder time with spicy food. It's weird how just that one experience can have such a profound effect, lasting effect. But yeah, my favorite spicy food. So I love spicy, spicy red curries and stuff like that. I think those are always fantastic. I'm trying to think what my favorite is. There's a restaurant near me that does, it's a Japanese restaurant. It's not like sushi. I mean, even though they do have sushi, but it's more just like a Japanese restaurant. And they have this chicken dish that it's kind of like chicken karaage, but they have this really spicy sauce that they put on it, and they call it Hell's Chicken. And it's so freaking good. It makes your forehead sweat. I love it. You carry around in your head at all times how a CPU works. Yeah, I bet you'd have to for your for what you do. Let's see. Okay, one more spicy take here, guys. Or spicy question. Did you stop sharing streaming with Tyler because of his drinking problem? I'll have to let him know that. That's funny. No, actually, I haven't been drinking in the last... I basically had to quit drinking for 10 days. Or for the next... Yeah, I've still got another 5 days to go. Because, I'm on antibiotics for the dental implants, so... which means no late night, tipsy streams. He's going reverse ASR, going from measuring headphones to amps. Actually, I just think that for that stuff, there's not enough. So there is other information out there, right? But there's not people don't use other sources as often, so they don't know. There's nothing that really corroborates that as strongly as what you get with headphone measurements on the same rigs. Like, so with the headphone measurement stuff, technically, anybody who has the KP5000 and the either a 43AG or a 45CA or something like that should be able to produce comparable results. So most of us, except for the folks who are on the 5128, most of us, or the head acoustic stuff, but most of us should be able to produce comparable measurements. Whereas with the amps and sources and all that stuff, like I know Golden does them, and there's a couple other people who do them, but it's not as commonly referenced. So I think it would be good to have additional sources for that kind of stuff. So that's it's one of the things I want to do. Could be one reason why you shouldn't buy the Focal Bentley Radiance. No, you should buy it. It's great. See, the thing is, the first version of that I got in had pads that it was like a demo unit, and there was something. I think the pads were like prototype and not the pads they ended up using. Because when I got a retail unit, I was like, "Whoa, this is so much better! This is amazing." So, like, actually, like the retail unit of the Radiance that I got in, I almost like it. Like, I like it better than the Celeste. It's more comfortable, and the pads are really nice. So, yeah. One more, guys. One more. I feel like I've said one more already and then went and found one, but I'll find another one. All right, I have there's a spicy one here, which is good. I'm gonna rephrase the question. So what's your take on BGGR reviewing his own tuned IEM, which I don't actually know anything about it. At least Kryn did not review the Dusk. So I have no idea what he's done there. I didn't pay attention to any of that stuff yet. But I think I'll phrase this in terms of Kryn not reviewing his own, like the thing that he tuned. I actually think that he could give, like Kryn could give his own take, like on the Dusk, for example, if he wanted to, and I wouldn't have any issues with that because he obviously likes it, right? He obviously tuned it for his own. Like he was influential in the tuning for his own preference, right? That makes sense. And another comparison would be Olive from Olive's Gadgets, right? He did like 3 or 4 videos on his own thing. I honestly don't have a problem with that. That's going to sound weird, but like it becomes a problem when there's a very clear, like, buy this instead of that. It's better, than other things in cases where they're wrong. But I think, like in Kryn's case, for example, with the Dusk, he basically just said, hey, here's a great platform with the Blessing 2. Here's my version of it. Yeah. Right. Like it wasn't like, and he'll tongue in cheek be like, yeah, go buy Dusk and whatever. And, he'll joke about shilling it and whatever, but like, he's not going to tell you that, the Dusk is better than his favorite IEMs. Like he I'm sure thinks that there are other IEMs that are better. So I think it only becomes an issue if somebody is, very obviously lying and trying to manipulate people. So to put it another way, if they're clear up front about the fact that it's their own, that they have a monetary incentive, like if they benefit from it in that sense, I don't really have an issue with that because that when you go in and same thing with again Olive from Olive's Gadgets, like his face is on, there's a picture of his face on the box. So I don't think anybody is under the illusion that there isn't any of that. Olive is always toxic in comment sections. I didn't know that. I'll love Olaf. Maybe signs his emails Olaf and not Olive. So I don't know. Maybe that's my spicy take on it, but I don't really have a problem with, reviewers promoting stuff that they worked on because that they had a hand in and that they stand to have a monetary gain in, as long as it's clear that's what's going on. Like that's what it is, because a review doesn't have to always be a perfectly neutral maybe a better way of phrasing it is you could do an overview, right? Just call it an overview and then it's fine. You can say, here's what I did, here's the difference in the tuning, here's how this is, I liked this before, but I didn't quite like this part, so I changed it, and now I like it better, right? Like that, I don't see any issue with that, So maybe that's just like a spicy perspective I have on it. But I don't have any problems with him, or with people doing that. But to be clear, I don't know anything about what BGGR is doing. I haven't seen that, so I'm not sure. I can't have a take on that yet. Cringe should become a VTuber with a waifu on the dusk, or with the waifu on the dusk. I still don't really know what a VTuber is, guys. That's so one day I'll have to get Taryn to let me know, inform me of that. Yeah, I saw you say that. Olive was toxic in the comments. In my video on his IEM. I thought his IEM was fine. I don't know. Like, you guys were talking about things I can't say about, it would be cheating to say that YouTube comments are the most toxic communities. I don't know about that. I don't know. I'll do my best to try and answer comments on videos after they're posted, but a lot of the times, especially if it's like a certain time after the video gets posted, it actually doesn't show up in the notifications, so I don't get it. I don't see it unless I go back to the video and read through all the comments. So there's a lot of chains that get buried, and I haven't seen that. But on a personal level, all of my correspondence with Olive from Olive's Gadgets via email have been perfectly fine. He's been totally fine. Which IEMs you like to put your name on? Do you know SA6? I'd put my face on that thing. Dunu SA6 and the U12T. Those are the two that I would. Yeah. Worst FR I've seen? Worst. Yeah, there's some headphones that they're either not fully released, or they're a lot of companies will email me and say, can you take a look at this and see what you think and give some feedback, right? So they'll send a thing, and I don't do a video about it. I don't publish information. I just give them, feedback. And because they want to release it, and there's a hope, I guess, that there's something going on that we could do a video about. But there are times when I'll measure it, I'll listen to it and measure it, I can't review this, this, and you shouldn't release this. So it doesn't, I don't know if it really does them a favor, but yeah, there's definitely some stuff that I can't really talk about because either it's not released or that is whoa. Yeah, Moondrop would be sweet to collaborate with as well. Yeah. I would want to collaborate with Dunu mostly, though, because of how awesome Tom is. And I love all the stuff that Tom's doing. With, just even some of the stuff that he's, had the rest of, other, reviewers, and myself included, do with the Zen Pro and stuff like that. So in touch with the community. Really awesome guy. Really knowledgeable as well. So yeah. Um, yeah, yeah. I love Crin's videos. They're hilarious. There's a lot of sass in them, and I feel like I would like to be able to do the sass, but you know, I think, I mean, he mentioned this on the live stream. I mean, he's established himself as much more of kind of like a lone wolf, I guess, and there are some costs to that, as in, you know, he's not the first person to get products from manufacturers all the time, and so, you know, it's a trade-off. But I think for us, the challenge, or for me at least, the challenge is, you know, making sure that I'm, you know, as still like transparent and honest and giving all the information, not glossing over anything. You know, same way that Crin does. It's just that, you know, Crin doesn't have to be quite as respectful, which is, I suppose, the advantage for him. But his videos are hilarious. But okay, I'm going to leave it at that, guys. Thanks to everybody for your questions, and you know, for hanging out. Big thanks to Metal571 for answering everybody's questions in the chat when I wasn't able to. And of course, you know, Banbeo as well. Check out Banbeo's channel. And anybody else who's... I should do that, make that a thing at the end of every live stream to say, hey, check out this other channel that I like. Okay, for today's, it's Banbeo. We should do a collaboration at some point. Or when the world opens up, maybe we'll take a trip out to visit. Because I want to go to that part of the world. You can show me what a VTuber is. But okay, I've got to go here, guys. Thanks again, and stay tuned for tomorrow's video, where I will announce the, or at least I think it'll be tomorrow, the giveaway for the month of September, even though it's like 10 days into the month already. But yeah, bye for now.